All right. Thanks so much, Michelle. And it's good to be with everybody. And so, hey, my goal today is that when we end this time, you have more time to do the things that really matter to you. So, I was thinking about this morning. If I can make you have 30 minutes that you get to spend on something else that is really a priority to you, that's 26 hours over the year. If I can do an hour, I can get you 52 hours a year. And I think that is incredibly reasonable. But think about what you could do with an extra 52 to 104 hours a year. You could change the world. So, I know you're probably eating lunch while I'm speaking. So my encouragement to you would be, like grab a paper plate, grab a piece of paper, or put the notes on your desk. But really, in a minute, I'm going to tell you how to make today work for you. But here's what we're going to do. There we go. So what I would do is on that paper plate or that piece of paper on your computer, I would just make notes on what should you start doing, what should you stop doing, and what should you continue doing? Because the reality is that each and every one of us, when we examine something like this topic, there are going to be some things that you go, you know what? I used to do that and I haven't been doing that. Or, you know what? Brian's got a point. I too need to stop doing that, just like Brian said he stopped doing it, or whatever that might be. So that's kind of the best way to make today work for you. Realistically, time management is kind of a weird phrase, really, when we think of it. But realistically, it's about managing ourselves, about managing others, about managing tasks, and just managing life. And so it really can be tricky. All of us have 168 hours in the week, and what we do with that is what really matters. So, Michelle, bring up our first poll question, if you will. And I want you to think about, what is your top priority for the week? So, do you know what that is? Yep. So the question is, do you know what your top priority is at the beginning of each week? That's really the question that you need to ask. So, or I need to ask. So go ahead and fill out the survey there. Again, do you know what your top priority is at the beginning of each week? That's kind of it's a yes or no, and we're going to kind of get a sense of that, see what the survey says. Give you a few more seconds there. All right, so right now it says 83% of us do. So you know what? That's key right there. Realistically, we need to be aware of what are our top priorities. If we don't know where we're going, we can't know how to get there. And so I want us to be thinking about what are our priorities. And as I was thinking about this, for me, it's faith, it's family, it's friends, it's fitness, it's finances, and philanthropy. I'm going to say those again: faith, family, friends, fitness, finances, and philanthropy. And when I say philanthropy, I'm thinking about giving back to the community, serving others, doing things like this BBB webinar, things like that allow me to give back to the community that I am in, or just overall based on what I really care about. And similarly with finances, that's one where I want to think about my business. Am I leading my business well? Am I thinking about the right priorities within my business? All of those kinds of things. But realistically, if we don't know what our priorities are overall, but also on a monthly and weekly basis, then how can we plan for it and how can we schedule for it? So my first recommendation to you would be that everything that you think about that you want to do, or if you say, I should do that, everything goes on a list. that when you have that thought, or you know that you are working on something, or it's a priority, or you have a goal, that it gets on a list. Because once it's on a list, then we can prioritize what we do. But the research has also shown that when we don't, when we try to keep things in our head, that it clutters us and it makes us ineffective. So one of the things I would tell you is just get everything on a list. Now, I'm a very visual person. And so I work best when I have a list that's on something large. Like when my office has a big whiteboard, and I am able to go to that whiteboard and I'm able to look and really deal with stuff and just work it through and go, okay, what on that gigantic list, what are the priorities for this week? Or what are the priorities for that day? Whatever it might be, but everything needs to get on a list. And then I start to think about what's my top priority. So most of the time, whether it's going into the office or working from home, whatever it might be, I usually ask myself the question, today will be a great day if, and then I fill in the blank. And usually that's one or two things that I go, you know what, if I get those two things done and done well, then it's going to be a great day. Now, do I only do those one or two things? No. But if I know that those are my top priorities and I give a lot of focus and attention and my schedule to that, and then everything else comes into play later, then I know that I'm going to be successful. I'm going to feel good about my day. And then I also ask the question, what impact will this have on my future? If I'm only doing the things that are urgent and only doing the things that I'm focused on right now, then I'm not forward thinking. And there's going to come a time of reckoning where I'm really frustrated that I didn't spend time. And so there's also that aspect of those priorities, really making sure that they have the long-term aspect as well. So then you've probably all heard of SMART goals. So for example, if one of my priorities is to get in better shape or to save more, well, that's pretty ambiguous. And so this acronym for SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely, can really help me to say, okay, I want to be able to achieve this physical goal or financial goal by a certain date. And then I need to make sure that it really is achievable. If I say, I want to be able to run a 4:30 mile by next month, well, let's just tell you, it's not achievable, and it doesn't matter what time frame you put out there, I wouldn't be able to do that. And so we've got to make sure that that works for us as well. And then focus on results. Too many times when I'm talking to people about how they spend their time, they talk a lot about the activity, but we need to be men and women and leaders and good employees that really focus on results and to really go, am I really making a difference? Again, making a difference on the things that matter to us or to our company, and going, okay, am I moving the needle or am I just doing the work? I've asked people at times, how did you spend your day? And they'll give me the answer, well, I was in a lot of meetings, or I sent a lot of emails, or I responded to a lot of emails, but what does that get us? So these are some of the questions that I've asked myself at times. The last one is probably my favorite. How's that working for me? When I am trying to accomplish something, and it's a good question to ask, how's that working for me? Because either I can enjoy the success, or I can go, you know what? I'm kind of spinning my wheels and I need to do something different. And one of the things I would say is if you're an employee of a company and you really don't have a clear idea of what results you really are responsible for, I would do some research. And if you still get stuck, I would ask your boss, what are the most important results that you want to see in the coming 3 months, or something like that. So let's pull up poll question number 2. Question number 2 is, do you consistently complete your most important tasks or responsibilities? Go ahead and answer there. Okay, looks like we're hovering in the 70-ish% range for yes. And that means about 30. We're trending a little higher. It's up to about 73 and 27. So again, if that's the case for you, if you really if you really kind of at the end of the week, you go, you know what, I'm really not getting done what I need to get done, then I'd ask that question. How's that working for you? And start to look at what you can do differently. And that's where we're going to invest a lot of the rest of our time today on the webinar. The first thing, and it has worked so well for me, is when I establish what those priorities are, then I look at what kind of tasks is it, and I then block time on my calendar to make sure that it gets done. And if something comes up and I need to move that, I don't get real firm on, oh no, I've got it at this time. But what I don't do is just disregard it. I oftentimes will go, if somebody needs me and I need to work on something else and I have something blocked on my calendar to work on a project, well, I'm definitely going to move it to another time. But again, it goes back to, are you giving time to what is most important? And if we block that on our calendar, then it increases the likelihood that it gets done. The other thing is that I know what kind of tasks work best for me at different times of the day. I am super creative and have a lot of energy between 6:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. And so that's a good time for me to work on projects and things that take some focus and dedication. But if my priority for that day is to spend time with staff or to engage with people on different levels, a lot of times I'll do that over lunch or I'll do that from mid-afternoon on, because for me, that's a good time for relationship type stuff, but not just a super time for that creativity and project-based work. So this may be for some of you that are not getting to those things that you consistently want to. I would say that blocking time on your calendar, putting in there, work on XYZ project, spend, if you're consistently needing to write blogs but you're never getting to it, then find the best time of day and put that on your calendar and work on those blogs at that point, whatever it might be. And then color code your calendar related to that. So those things that I do consistently, like I talked about earlier, faith, family, friends, fitness, finances, philanthropy, I have those color coded on my calendar so I can look at any given time and see what's coming up ahead and what's gone on behind. And I can evaluate what I've done and I can go, you know what, I look a little too heavily weighted in one area, or I can see that I'm really neglecting some areas. So color coding your calendar can be really helpful. Another thing, and you're welcome to email me if you would like one of these spreadsheets, but I have a thing called, it's an Excel spreadsheet and it has 168 hours blocked out on that Excel sheet. And it's in 30-minute increments. And about every 2 years, I will go through and for 7 days, for 168 hours, I will put in there what I am doing in 30-minute increments. And every single time I do it, I find something where I go, you know what, I'm spending too much time on one thing and not enough on another. And it helps us to identify those patterns of ours. And so I know there's an app out there if there's not 40, but I typically just like the 168-hour spreadsheet. And I almost always do this with all my coaching clients because almost all of them are looking to be more efficient and more effective with their time. And so just last week, I was doing this with a coaching client and he looked at it after he was done and he said, wow, I did not know that my family was watching that much TV and I didn't know that I was exercising that little. And then he looked at, you know what, I'm not spending the time with my staff that I would like to. And he said, you know what, I'm going to block some time on my calendar as a result of his time log. And he started blocking some time on his calendar for management, just walking around. So look consider doing a time log to kind of analyze how you're spending your time. Now, one of the things that once we've identified what our priorities are and we have really established maybe some smart goals, sometimes we get stuck. And one of the things that I often will do when I am stuck is I'll just get started. Instead of trying to think through everything, I'll just get started on a little bit. Probably, I'll give you two examples. One is just last week, I was kind of I was kind of in a fitness funk, and I was like, man, I do not want to get out and ride my bike today. And I was like, nah, just get out there. It'll turn out okay, probably. And I tell you what, the first 15 minutes of it, I looked like I was a 90-year-old man biking. I was just trudging along. And I got a little more energy and a little more pep. Well, I tell you what, the last 30 minutes of my ride were awesome. I was doing some trails that I hadn't done in a while, and it was fantastic. But more on a work standpoint, oftentimes when I need to write an article, I don't have it all figured out. But you know what? I'll open a doc. I'll save that doc in the right file with the right title. I'll put the things in there that I know need to be covered. And before long, I'm writing an article. And so when you get kind of in that funk and you just don't know where to start, well, get started with what you do know. Hey, and just a reminder, we are going to be answering questions at the end. So if you've got any questions, go ahead and be typing those into the chat, and we'll take care of those in a few minutes. All right, the next one, the next little tip for you, as again, I'm trying to give you some minutes or hours back to your week, is, and this works real well for me, is put some deadlines down or give yourself a reward if you will do it. So there is a law called Parkinson's law. So unfortunately, we probably all know about Parkinson's disease, but I found that most people don't know about Parkinson's law. And Parkinson's law says we fill the time that we give ourselves to complete a task. So if there's a task that I block out 2 hours, but realistically, it only takes 30 minutes most of the time to do it. If I block 2 hours, I will probably fill that time. However, the flip side is true too. If I say, I wonder if I can't get this done, I am in a block, and I'll set my phone. I'll grab my phone, I'll set my timer, and I will say, you've got 30 minutes to complete it, and that alarm is going to go off. And you know what? Most of the time, I get it done. And so, you know, the best way to think about this is to think about how much work you get done the week before you leave on vacation. Most of us get 10 to 14 days worth of work done in those days right before. And so we can be more efficient and more effective. So set a deadline, set your alarm, whatever it might be. And then at other times, I'll give myself a reward. Sometimes it's super minor if it's really small. Hey, you know what? If I complete that task by 2:30 p.m., I'm going to buy myself a Coke Zero. Pretty minor investment. At other times, I'll give myself a bigger one. You know, I'll treat myself to a steak dinner, or I'll buy myself something that I might want to buy. So sometimes it's just giving ourselves a little self-trickery, if you will, to be more effective and efficient. The next one I want to hit is smart filing. And I tell you what, I struggled with this for years and still not the very best, but I know that when I do well with this, it goes well. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about hard copy files, or electronic files. When we are smart about our filing, when we have a real system and it's something that we understand, we can save so much time, because there is a lot of time wasted looking for things or redoing things that we have already done 90% of the work for. And so there's so many things that get repeats, and we do it again. We do it maybe once a year, or we do it once a month, or whatever it might be. But you think about it, if you are more efficient with those and you're able to quickly find those files, you're quickly able to adapt what you're doing, you can save a considerable amount of time over the course of a year. And so I want you to think about, what are those time wasters for you? Each and every one of us has those things that we are most likely to get lost on or we waste time with, and we just have to be a little bit more disciplined. And so, certainly for me, I mean, there are times where I'll want to read on something, and I'll go, you know what, that's not the best use of this time. There's a time and a place for that. Or over the course of my career, there are definitely times where I have that attitude of, oh man, I don't want to overload my staff, so I'm not going to delegate that to them. So just think about what is that biggest time waster for you and rank them. Again, grab your paper plate and write down what you waste time on and then rank them. And then once you do that, I would encourage you to smash them. Really think through, okay, if I make sure and don't do that time waster, then I am going to be so much more effective over the course of a month or a year or a lifetime. So I'm not going to do that. And if you come to that place where you're like, I do not know how to tackle that, well, talk to a friend, go do some research. Man, Google can be your friend, but don't waste too much time on Google looking for that. Find a good article and go from there. And then now, given maybe we have a few less physical drop-ins during this COVID season. So many of us are working independently in places, but when we have those drop-ins, we need to be mindful that those can we can waste quite a bit of time with that. So one of the things I will often do when I've got people that are popping into my office and I need to be more focused, one of the things that I always do was I stand up. When they come in, I stand up. And most of the time when that happens, we're standing up looking at each other, and research has shown those meetings last less time. And so you can save some time that way. Now, it doesn't always work. There was one gentleman that worked in my office, and he would come in and I would stand up and he would sit down. He was not getting that message, but most of the time we can do it. But sometimes I'll go, you know what, this is not a good time. Can I come by your office in an hour, or can we schedule a time to meet? Those are the kinds of things that we can do just to make sure that we're being more effective. But it's not just the physical, it's also the telephone. And one of the things I would encourage you to do is especially when you are focused on a project or you have dedicated that time on your calendar, man, when the telephone rings, it does not mean you have to answer it, unless, of course, that's your company policy, or you're a 911 operator. If you're a 911 operator, please answer the phone when it rings every single time. But you control the telephone. And so what I almost always do is when the phone rings, I let it go to voicemail. And when I'm done working on what I'm doing, I will check the voicemail. If I think it's somebody that might need something more urgent, I might check it earlier than that. But then I can return those phone calls when I'm ready. Sometimes it can save me time because I'm able to go look at something and come in more prepared. Sometimes I can batch those phone calls and make all my phone calls while I'm, driving home or going for a walk or things like that. So think about the telephone not being, make it a tool for you. Don't just let it be something that interrupts you, because research has shown every time when we are focused on task and we get interrupted, it takes approximately 16 minutes for us to get back in the same zone, working as focused as we were before. And so you think about, if you get interrupted just 4 times during the day like that, that could be a whole hour wasted. Next thing I'd tell you is know yourself. Where do you consistently waste time? I've put 2 pictures up here that remind me of 2 that were very true of me for a lot of years. I would come home and I would put my keys in a variety of places. And then the next day, I would spend time trying to find where those keys were. My wonderfully organized wife at one point put just a little key holder right by the door, and I am very diligent and disciplined to put them there. And that has helped a ton to save me time and save me frustration. Somewhat similarly, I am very consistently, I park where when I walk out of a building, I am on the left side. Okay. And so that has just become a consistent practice that when I walk out, I look to the left, and that's usually where I will find my car, and it saves some time. So now it's time for poll question number 3. So question is, how often do you feel like there's not enough time in the week to do what matters? Rarely, sometimes, or often? Okay, so right now we're at 54% often, 35% sometimes, and about 10% rarely. And you know what? I would say that is probably pretty normal. And so as we think about there not being enough time, think about what is it that I'm mentioning? What are these tips really apply to you? And think about your start, stop, and continue, and see if we can't get it where we've got the time to do what really matters to us. So next little tip for you is to think about your pace. Now that does not mean that we always need to be moving like a race car, but at the same time, we also don't need to always work at a pace like a Model T. So think about what's the right pace for this day, this time. 2 weeks ago, I woke up and my family was either going to be sleeping or tied up until about noon. And I love the work that I do. And so I just said, you know what? I'm going to go into the office and I'm going to get a little bit ahead on a project that I'm working on, a presentation, actually, a training that was upcoming. And I got in there and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to work at a vigorous pace. And I would do 30-minute increments. I would work for 30 minutes and I would take a lap on the indoor track. And I'd work for 30 more minutes and work on the indoor track. Now, at the end of those 3 or 4 hours that I was there, I got a lot done. And I moved the needle a lot on that project, but I also kind of had a relaxing time. Every time I took a walk, I was listening to a book on tape. And it was a nice pace for what that day called for. So think about your pace. The next thing I would tell you is think about bundling. You know, I don't know. I know we got people all over. I made the joke here. Suddenlink shouldn't be the only one bundling because we always see these commercials about our cable providers bundling with telephone and internet and things like that. But when we bundle tasks together, it reduces the learning curve and our brains work more efficiently. But if we're using our computer, so does our computer. So for example, this morning, I was sending out a couple of proposals for training and I knew that was coming up. And so rather than sending out one last week and one this week at the very beginning, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take care of both of them on Monday morning. And I blocked a little bit of time on my calendar. Well, you know what, when I do that, my computer's already, when I hit open up on the file, it's already going back to the last file I opened. And so it's already in that zone, but also I'm in that mindset and I'm just a little bit more efficient and effective. The next one to think about is neatness matters. Now, I sure hope that your office does not look like the picture that I've got here on my presentation, but I've seen offices that look like this. And when we have a clean, organized environment, we not only feel better and makes us more efficient and effective, but we are able to work in a much better way. So every once in a while, I have to schedule a couple of hours of time where I will sit down at my desk and I will think about it. And I'll use these 4 things to think about what am I going to do with the stuff that has accumulated. Can I toss it? Can I delegate it? Should I act on it right then, or do I need to file it? And increasingly, all of my files are electronic, so I can find them anywhere. So again, make your space usable and clean and productive, and think about, what should I throw away? What should I delegate? What do I need to act on right now and just get taken care of? And what do I need to file? I'd also encourage you to think about transitions. So I like to use transitional time productively. And that doesn't always mean, or even most of the time mean, that it's work-related stuff. But when I'm driving, I oftentimes will listen to a book on tape. I'll listen to some upbeat music. During this COVID time, I've listened to a lot of comedians because I wanted to laugh more. So use that time wisely and think about, okay, rather than just sitting here, how can I make this time productive? So for example, most of the time, if I'm back when my kids were small, when they had some practices, I would either be the coach because I wanted to be engaged and serve, or I would do laps around the court or the track or whatever they were on so that I got some exercise while I was doing that. So just use that kind of transitional time in a way that makes sense for your priorities. Now, email is oftentimes a big culprit, and so I want to hit upon this pretty quickly. Some tips for managing email. The four Ds, I should say: delete it, do it, delegate it, or defer it. And so it's estimated that about 50% of email can be deleted. So when you see it, man, if it's something that doesn't really, it's not going to be useful, or you can find it elsewhere, I would just get it out of the way and delete it. About 30% of the email, they say, can be done in 2 minutes or less. And if that's the case, just knock it out and take care of it. Do it right then and there. About 10% should be deferred. It's going to take a while longer. Right now, I'm getting some results from assessments from some people that I'm going to be doing some training with on Friday. And so when I see those, I'm just flipping them right into a folder, not bothering looking at them now, but just sending them right into the folder. And by the way, I'm often tempted to look at what are their results and what is it saying. But you know what? That's not the most important task right now. And there is going to come a time where I really need to be focused and dedicated to that. And so I'm going to just push it off. So think about: delete it, do it, delegate it. If it's somebody else's responsibility, delegate it or defer it. And I've created folders. Those have been helpful to me. I've got different folders on my email. And about 2 years ago, I made the biggest difference. I started 2 folders, the ones you see on the bottom of this little presentation. I call them A emails to respond to and AB emails to respond to. And anytime I see something that really is important and is going to need to be responded to fairly quickly, I move it into my A email to respond to. And I use that A because it comes up higher both on my computer and on my phone pretty easily. And then the AB is right below it. And so now when I'm sitting there, waiting for an oil change, and I move emails into that email to respond to, when I go back to the office, that's the first folder I check, and I'm able to follow up. Until I did this, I would say that email was always a serious frustration, and I wasted a lot of time, and I dropped some balls because of my lack of organization around email. So there's easy ways to drag and drop that. All right, time for our 4th poll question as we start to wrap up our time. And that question is: on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard is it for you to say no? So 1 is easy, 10 is extremely difficult, and it definitely looks like we're leaning towards the extremely difficult. In fact, we now have over 55% above 8. So everybody right now, no matter where you are, just say no. Now say it again, say it a little bit more emphatically: no. That right there can be a good practice for us. You will remember Nancy Reagan's campaign, just say no, and I would tend to agree with it. So I like this quote from Gandhi. A no uttered from the deepest conviction is better than a yes merely uttered to please or worse, to avoid trouble. You know, if we say yes to everything, there is a good chance we're not going to get to our priorities. Because I told you, my priorities are faith, family, friends, fitness, finances, and philanthropy. You know what? If I say yes to everything that people are asking me to do, I'm not going to get to those priorities. And to Gandhi's point, I'm probably not going to do it as effectively as I should. And so there are times where people will ask me to go work with an organization and volunteer and things like that. And you know what? I've got organizations that I passionately care about, that I want to give to. And so I'm not going to say yes to every one of theirs because it's going to take time. There are times where people do ask me to go to a charity fundraiser for an organization that they really care about. But you know what? I maybe have traveled quite a bit for business at that point, and I need to spend more time with my family. And so really be more comfortable with saying no, or no, not this time, or no, not right now. Think about errands and chores. Are you really the right person to do them? You know, some of them are going to be small tasks. Some of them are going to be really large. Think about what your skills and expertise are. It may be that you have some friends that are great and love painting interior of houses, and you are really good with irrigation systems. Well, you know what? Maybe barter a little bit and trade off with them. But think about the use of your time with errands and chores, and if they're sucking the life out of you and taking a lot of time and they're not good, think about, is there a better way to do it? And sometimes some of those get a little bit better for me because I'm listening to something that really matters. I mow my yard twice a week right now. I do not like mowing my yard, but I like it a little bit more because I listen to things that are really kind of valuable to me. I either listen to fiction that I really enjoy, or I listen to a book that grows my skills. And now we're getting close to Q&A time. A few more that I want to talk about is use your phone smartly. You know, most of us have smartphones, if not all of us. And there are some really good apps out there that can save us time or help us grow in skills or whatever we're passionate about. So think about, you know, for example, I've got friends that always buy groceries online, and they feel like they save a lot of time that way. And so make sure that you're using your phone in such a way that really does help you along the way. So I want you to think about, what would you like to have more time to do at work, and what would you like to have more time to do personally? And then I want you to apply the things that we've talked about today and block some of time on your calendar for this week. Since it's Monday, probably I would say just do it this week. Block some time to do what you just said in the answer to those two questions. Block some time on your calendar and then do some of these tips and tricks so that you get more time and you're still able to do the things that you needed to do and you wanted to do, but you're making sure that you get to the priorities. So now it's time for questions. So Coleman and Michelle, you want to help me with questions? How do you want to do that?
And whoops, there we are. Hi, Brian. I am back. There we go. Thank you. We actually do have lots of questions in the Q&A, but as a reminder, a couple people raised their hands, so if you have a question, put it in the Q&A feature. We're also taking a look at the chat box if you had some questions in there. So, all right. So, little list of questions here.
Okay.
How do I identify when I'm wasting time on a task?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways to do that. One would be to think about just personally, how long do you think that task should take? Or it might be, you know, when you've been at your most efficient, how long did it take you? Otherwise, you might ask colleagues who do similar kind of work, or do some research with maybe an association that might have kind of some standards of how long it takes to do different things. But that's probably the way that I would go about it, is to go, okay, what is an effective amount of time? But then also to look, okay, during the course of that work, how many times did you do things that distracted you or took you away from it?
Good. This next question made me think of a book that I have all of my leadership team read. It's an oldie but goodie. It's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And their question is, I find it's sometimes hard to prioritize what is urgent and what is not. How can I fix this? And it made me think of the 4 quadrants that's in one of the very first chapters of that book.
Right, right. So repeat the title of that book.
7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah, so it hits upon the urgent with the important and all of that very, very well. You know, most of the time, I would say by doing a 168-hour time log, that usually helps us to identify, but also to take a look at your week and say, okay, how much of my week is just getting done what needs to be done for now, and how much of it is really thinking about the future? Now, most of the time, I'm in a place where I kind of have a 10-year plan, and my company has a strategic plan, and those are the kinds of things that really guide us. And so I'm looking at how much time am I getting towards those things versus just kind of responding to what happens this week.
Very good. Next question, how do I overcome procrastination?
Okay, so, and Michelle, any of these you want to answer, feel free to answer. So how do you overcome procrastination? First of all, you admit it, identify it, admit it, and that's probably where the just get started part comes in best. It's a serious problem for a lot of people, and I would say there are times where it has been a serious problem for me. And that segment where I talked about just get started, that is one that that is how I personally have addressed that. Is when I see myself procrastinating, then I just get started. Now I will say oftentimes, and I'll do this in some of my workshops, where I will have people think about what is it that you are pushing off? What is it that you're procrastinating on? What is it that you know you need to do, but you are not doing? And sometimes it's having a conversation, and sometimes it's working on a task. Sometimes I'll ask the question of, what are the parts of your job that you like the least? For many people, that's the things that they're procrastinating on. And I will say, well, then how much of your week or month does it take? Put those on the calendar, and find the time where it works best for you. That's where the rewards thing might be, is say, okay, if I do the part of my job that I like the least on Monday morning from 8 to 9 a.m., then I'm going to buy myself a Starbucks on Tuesday or whatever it might be. But certainly that can get you in trouble, both personally and professionally. So I would say figure that one out and address it.
Figure that one out. And you might be procrastinating because it may be one of the things that you can delegate.
Sure.
It may not be something you have to be doing. Some of us have the choice to be able to do stuff like that.
Right.
But you also might have the personality of a procrastinator. In that case, I would say hire a coach.
There you go.
Right?
Yes.
All right. How do I overcome exhaustion? I find myself being more productive from 6:30 to 11:30, same time as you.
Okay. Yeah. So how do you overcome exhaustion? I would say probably do some kind of self-analysis to see, are you eating right? Are you healthy? Are you mentally healthy? So this part, I would typically say, make sure that you have, good mental, physical, spiritual, psychological, just that you're healthy. And if there's something there, then address it, and start to work on that. And then also, there's times definitely where I'm like, man, I've got no energy, and I'm thinking about why, and I'm like, oh, I've eaten pretty poorly, the last couple of days, and it reflects in that way.
Absolutely. You can't pour from an empty cup. You have to fill it
Well
back
said.
up. It also means maybe having some times of reflection, where you're getting away and not working and just thinking about what your priorities are and doing some of this homework basically that you've given us to get a better framework about what we need to be doing. So,
Yeah, I had a colleague one time that he and his wife both were doing very, very stressful work, and you can tell this won't be a COVID answer, but they would book quarterly cruises. So every quarter they would go on a cruise because they had identified that's how they got replenished.
mhm,
And at that point, people couldn't contact you on cruises. It was really expensive for people to call you on a cruise. And so that was just what they did. But to your point, Michelle, they identified what the issue was, and then they identified how to solve it, and that was what was working for them.
absolutely. That's a great idea. Next question. How can I better focus on one task and finish it to move on to the next?
How can you focus on one task before you move on to the next? Well, I think uh, I think most of the time blocking the calendar is
Mhm.
the best way. But then it depends upon your environment. Um, there was one environment that I worked in for 8 years, and we kind of had this unwritten code that if my door was open, man, you were welcome to come in. If my door was closed but my blinds were open, that just meant I was trying to avoid some sound coming in. If my door was shut but my blinds were closed, then I was really trying to stay focused and barring something fairly urgent, leave me alone. But if I had all of that going on and a do not disturb sign, man, the building needed to be on fire. And so I'd say just kind of figure out yourself, but then also work with your environment to make sure that you're getting that focused, dedicated
Yeah,
time.
absolutely. Okay, one more question. How do you explain this level of productivity to significant others that are more spontaneous and don't really like time blocking? Um, I hear that I should be more fluid and flexible, but I really hate idle time.
Okay. Sounds like that's kind of a communication issue, that people have to understand that we're all wired differently. And I would also say what works for you now may not work for you in 5 years. Your situation may change, your environment may change, you may change. And so a certain amount of that is understanding ourselves really well and then understanding others and having good communication so that we can all work at our best.
Absolutely. Okay, last question. How do you get upper management on board to have realistic content creation and project timelines? It seems we have an ongoing battle to understand number of hours per week and the time the project takes. Also, how do you manage the project list when the last minute additions are added from upper management? They want them all done, not this or that.
Yeah, carefully. That's how you do it. You handle it carefully. No, I do think that this is where memberships and associations and industry groups can be beneficial to evaluate what is a normal amount of time. And then I think some of it is probably good communication and sometimes showing a calendar and saying, I had this one come up with a client a couple of weeks ago, one of my coaching clients, where they just needed to go to their boss and let them see how many hours a day they were in meetings and then allow them to say, you know what, how would you like for me to get these projects done when I have this much time that's all automatically blocked every week for meetings? And I think that
Mhm.
applies to this person too. It's, you know what,
Yeah.
this takes this amount of time. And then on the second part of that question, I think there is you know, we've got 2 hours to finish this project. You've given us 4 hours of work. Do you want this or that? And at least and I'm not saying that's always going to come about because there's bad bosses out there, but
Sure.
sometimes it's just a matter of communication. And then two, I would do some self-reflection and say, are you working efficiently and effectively? Because if you give that kind of response to a boss, but then they see you wasting time, well, that's not going to go well. So I would do some self-reflection, but making the assumption that you're working in a very timely way and efficient and all of that, I would seek to have those kinds of discussions, and I would check with your industry associations.
Standards. It also seems like there may be a level of trust that's not there for that
True.
communication to happen. So maybe
Yeah.
find some ways to kind of build that trust with your leadership team so that they'll listen. But again, like you said, they may be a part of an organization that, you know, might not. So
There's a
they,
couple of dysfunctional companies out there, yes.
mhm, for sure.
So, and
Okay.
yeah, and I will say, to finish that point, I would say, we develop trust by starting with relationships. So are we communicating well? Are we fostering relationships? And if so, then we can start to build towards trust.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, thank you so much. You're always a wealth of information. We're so grateful to have you, always partnering with us, and grateful to have you here in East Texas. And I know that all the participants, we're grateful to have you here. We will be sharing a copy of this video on YouTube. You'll receive it in an email within the next 24 hours. Will you share your template, your 168 hours
Yes,
spreadsheet? And then they wanted to know if we could have a copy of the slides as well in a PDF format. We'll send that as well if you
we
have
can do
that
both of
available.
those. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. All right, guys. Just as a reminder, we have a Shred Day coming up on August 15th, and hopefully we'll see you there in Jacksonville, Texas. Our next webinar is on Wednesday. Dr. Mashara Fields is going to be presenting on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And then we won't have another one until September, and it's going to be how to protect your business from cyber crimes. So hopefully you will join us at one of those, at both of those webinars. You'll receive an invitation tomorrow via email, along with a link to our YouTube video of this webinar here. So again, thank you all. Thank you, Brian, and we will
Thank
see
you.
you next time.